Mention Australia, and we tend to think of koalas and kangaroos. But today, on the fringes of outback wilderness, a lush southern region is producing some of the world's most acclaimed wine and food. In the next half hour, senior editor Clive Irving takes us through South Australia's Aboriginal heritage and European immigrations, as well as toasts some of the mouth-watering cuisine and wine. The city of Adelaide is set in the southeast corner of the state of South Australia. Adelaide has a sort of a sweet, quaint feeling about it. It's very green. Seems like everywhere you turn there's some parkland.
The founding of Adelaide was a deliberate piece of planning, whereas the other Australian cities grew out from the very first landings, the first settlements. The people who came here wanted to express a kind of idealism to build a wonderful city that had no industrial pollution, had this designated amount of green space. And the other fascinating thing about the people who settled the city, they started out by acknowledging that the Aborigines had the rights of any native people to their own land. And of course, that didn't hold good for very long, but that tells you something about the people who built Adelaide. There was an idealism in them.
Really, today was an introduction to the state of South Australia's muchness. I would say that would be the incredible culinary richness of the region.
Adelaide is the centre of all the waves of both immigration and styles in food in Australia. They all come together in one place, the Central Market in Adelaide, where you can see probably the most exotic mixture of food and food ingredients in the world. This old snout of mine has been in many troughs across the world, but I don't think it's ever been in a trough quite as exotic as this one. What's in store for us is a lot of really good munching. Can I get a piece, or is it girls' home?
Oh, sorry.
Behind what we saw in the market today was another story, which was the story of what Australian food used to be like. When the English first came here, what they wanted to do, and they wanted to reproduce the food they knew from the country they came from. And it took about 100 years for them to discover the resources they had right under their noses when they first arrived. If you cut that open, it would explode. Pleasure for the traveller, I think, is realising in this relatively small space, what was coming together was this great exotic invention that's Australia, or Oz.
It's like lettuce the size of Georgia.
This is the lettuce memorial.
The thing probably that blew my mind the most was eating emu. I hardly knew what an emu was before I got to Australia. I knew it was some sort of big fluffy bird, but who knew you could eat an emu?
Yeah, just eat it as it is. Yeah.
Go ahead.
This is delicious.
A lot of people slice a little bit thicker and just fry it up on the barbecue.
We'll throw an emu on the barbie.
Again, in the exotic meats category, we visited the kangaroo vendor. He served kangaroo every way you could imagine.
We make salami, sausages, hamburgers. We do about 30 different cuts of kangaroo meat.
This is kangaroo pepperoni, and I love pepperoni, and this is my first taste of the Australian sacrament, kangaroo. Yummy.
But some people feel it's politically incorrect to eat the national symbol on the plane of the state airline, or they think the kangaroo is a sacred animal. It's just like any other feral animal. Since I've now eaten a kangaroo and enjoyed it, I'm not sentimental about it at all. We came to the red ochre because the red ochre is really the cutting edge of Australian cuisine.
Red ochre is a pioneer of the bush tucker culinary movement here in Australia.
Bush and tucker. Bush is the place the stuff comes from, and tucker is the stuff, the food, so that you get seasoning and spices and fruits and meats but are truly native Australian.
Yeah, I just want them in the bowl to wash because that's going to go with these in the pasta. Yeah, with lobster flavour.
So the first dish we had was kangaroo, amazingly tender kangaroo. You could have cut it with a blunt knife. And it was juicy, it was flavourful, and it had the quandong sauce on it.
The quandong, or the native wild peach, is from southern Australia, out back. It's slightly acidic, quite fleshy, but it has peachy characteristics to it as well, so it works really well with the kangaroo with the acid.
I mean, they're cute, they're cuddly, but they're also fine eating.
Well, there speaks a carnivore. Tucker is Australian for food. I've always felt tucker was more than food. It's sort of tucking in. It's sort of having a really Falstaffian kind of joy about eating.
The pavlova. Really, the topping to the experience at Red Ochre Restaurant was the wattle seed pavlova. It was this delicious sort of heaping, custardy, light dessert with a sort of chocolatey wattle seeds and an incredibly piquant plum ice cream served with it.
But it's not really like anything, is it? It's a quite distinctive, individual and quite assertive taste. Has a lot of character.
Just like you, Clive. Adelaide is known as the Australian city with the most eateries per capita. But the most famous eatery in all of Adelaide is this pie floater stand down by the casino.
I've never met a pie that I couldn't really like, and met its ultimate test today with the pie floater. Literally, the pie that floats. Young man, we want two of your finest pie floaters.
You haven't had one before?
No, I'm afraid not.
I think you're in for a treat.
Yes, a treat of some kind or another.
Just sounded disgusting, really. It's a sort of meat pie floating in pea soup with some sort of tomato something on top of it. I understand that it can be quite messy.
I think I'm a very messy eater anyway. I think dribbling is involved here.
Yeah.
You need some tomato sauce in that one?
Oh, yes. The only excuse I can think of for the pie floater is that it's the one thing that keeps alive the memory of the world's worst food cuisine, the Old English stodge. It's also true, which I've heard, which I find astonishing, that people come here after a night out when they're really laced.
In the droves.
In the droves, and they eat this on top of being really smashed.
Do. If you drop by here at about 4 a.m. on a Saturday night, you'd probably have about 30 people to line up behind, I think.
So what do you think, Dana?
Cheers. It's good.
You love it.
As long as you don't look at it, you're fine.
Don't look at it while you're eating it, right?
No.
You gain nerve as you eat it.
Like most terrifying facts of adulthood, yes. The city of Adelaide is a sort of urban jumping off point to some of the best wines in all of Australia. Clive had been in South Australia for long enough without having had the wine that he so desired. So we took a great drive so that he could show me one of his favorite vineyards in the world.
Because this is a peripheral country in that everything that grows is virtually on the edge of it, you're conscious when you do a drive like we did of edging slowly and slowly towards the edge, the ultimate edge of the country, which is all the interior of it. Think of a fried egg. We're in the white going towards the yolk.
These beautiful century-old gum trees that rose 4 stories, sort of jutting out of this rolling countryside around us. And it looked like cattle land to me at first until we passed rows and rows of vines looking so healthy and some of them still heavy with grapes.
The metalled road ends and you're on a dirt track and suddenly there's clouds of dust and it gives you a real sense that you're almost in the outback and there's a winery here. That's a pretty extraordinary juxtaposition.
The minute we mentioned South Australia, Clive was just crazy for the wine here. He was absolutely resolute that South Australia had some of the finest wine on the globe, and some of the finest wine in South Australia was at Henschke.
Well, the Henschke family makes a lot of good wine, but the best, of course, is Hill of Grace, which is named after the church next to the vineyard. Stephen Henschke is the 5th generation of the Henschke family. That means the first generation came over in the 1840s, and the skill of making these wines has been passed down from generation to generation. And this is an amazingly old vine that we're standing next to, and I think this vine mirrors the generations of your own family, doesn't it? When was it planted?
It was planted in 1860. Just imagine back in the middle of that century, our ancestors coming here and bringing vine cuttings from Europe.
There were two waves of immigration here, the Anglo-Saxon wave, which settled around Adelaide and the Adelaide Hills, and then these Lutherans who were fleeing from religious persecution in Silesia, and they came here and they started farming and they made the wines.
Realistically, the climate dictates the style of wine you make. So if you can imagine what it was like in Europe in those days, where it's cold and wet, very far north in Silesia, they would have been lucky to have got the grapes ripe, even half ripe. When they got here, the grapes would have ripened up so easily, the fermentations would have gone like crazy.
It exploded. We were very lucky because we came right in the middle of the great grape harvest. So it's a crucial moment in the life of a new vintage when they know for the first time what they've got. And it was a really exciting thing to see going on.
This is a bit of an example of what the Hill of Grace Shiraz look like. What makes a really good Shiraz is the intensity of colour and flavour that's in these berries. So when you squeeze a berry now, you just see the blood red juice that comes out of the berry. The little berries taste even bitter, don't they?
I just want it in a bottle as fast as possible. Ah, I love that sound. I'd like to describe to you the taste of Hill of Grace Shiraz, but I don't think I really can do any justice to it because it involves using all those silly words that wine experts use. All I can say is that it's a very particular Shiraz. It doesn't taste like any other Shiraz because it's particular to a place, it's fruity, and it's lovely. Everyone should live to taste this wine. We came up across the Great Barossa Plain, which is a sort of plateau, from the Hinchkey Winery to the Clare Valley. And the Clare Valley is my favourite place in Oz, I think, because it's a very different feel. It's like a little piece of Provence or Tuscany plopped into what is essentially the middle of a wilderness. So you come upon it, it's like a bit like Shangri-La. If you go half an hour north of the Clare Valley, you run into real desert. The outback's not that far away. So this is, in fact, the last nirvana before you get out into the really burnt parts of Australia.
The culmination of the drive that Clive and I took out of Adelaide was at a place called Thorne Park in Clare Valley. And Thorne Park is exceptional because, it's an acclaimed bed and breakfast.
Thorne Park represents an ideal I always have in travel, which is what I call the perfect pillow, the place where you want to end up after driving through the day. Thorne Park was created by David Hay and Michael Spears, two wonderful guys who, in fact, over the last 10 years or so have created what should be the model for an Australian country inn, in the sense that it embodies both the qualities of European country inns and those things which make Oz particularly special. Its taste and pleasure and great hosting, a really relaxed place, where you don't feel any formality at all.
Adelaide is nicknamed the City of Churches for its many houses of worship. In the countryside around the city, spirituality has inspired more earthly pleasures at the Seven Hill Cellars Vineyards in the Clare Valley. Jesuit priests moved here in 1848 and planted a few vines for sacramental wines. Today, these vines have evolved into internationally recognized Cabernets and Rieslings. Lucky for us, they've moved down from the altar and onto our table. For Condé Nast Traveler, I'm Dana Dickey.
For more information, please contact our website at www.cntraveler.com.